moccasins, and a huge mug of coffee.
It's not big enough.
No? Oh no. Okay, here we go.
Yeah. Gets my blood going. Woo!
Whoa. So I feel very selfish because it's only me who could enjoy your dance. So I apologize to everybody who couldn't see you dancing anyway. But good morning once again, Timothy. Good morning to everybody who is in Clubhouse listening to us or who is watching us on YouTube or LinkedIn. This is Japan Expert Insights featuring Timothy Langley, CEO of Langley Esquire, a consultancy firm in downtown Tokyo. It's January 1st, and a Happy New Year to everybody, to you too, Timothy, to Mario and Tomoko once again. It's been a busy week, even though half of it has been, well, let's say national holiday, I believe. And we don't know how long we can go today, but certainly there have been a lot of things going on before this new year. And Timothy, I'm going to give the floor to you now. So
Woohoo!
it's your turn.
Thank you very much, Maya. Happy New Year once again, and Happy New Year to everybody who is listening in on this channel, and maybe later picking it up on YouTube. Welcome to 2023, and as Maya was saying in her opening remarks, kind of good riddance to 2022, because it really, when you look at it in retrospect, it really was a pretty horrible year, especially if you are Prime Minister Kishida. So he closed out the year. He's like everybody else, eating mikan and going through postcards that have arrived in the mail at his residence, probably within the Kante, the prime minister's residence, where he lives. He's set up residence there since he became prime minister, and he's joined, as you might remember, by his son, who is his secretary, his policy secretary. This caused a big brouhaha, you might remember, just after the elections, or just before the elections, when he appointed his son as his policy secretary. This, reeks of nepotism for some people. I mean, it's pretty much par for the course here in Japan. But he does occupy the main house on the compound there. Not shabby. So Happy New Year to you, Mr. Prime Minister, and to your family. And I wish you the very best for 2023. I know you've got a lot on your plate. The Prime Minister closed out the year by visiting, importantly enough, the Tokyo Stock Exchange. This is the first time that a Prime Minister has closed the stock exchange for the new year in about 14 years. That's pretty startling when you think about it. So he went there, rang the bell, closed out the year. He is really courting favor with the corporates, the big companies, the shareholders, that class of voters, because he's really trying to trigger this new capitalism that he's been talking about. And that means having people relinquish the tremendous wealth that they've accumulated over their lifetimes. And as you know, the demographics are that Japan has a huge older population, and they have been mostly frugal and not hoarded, but saved their money for the rainy day. And that pretty much characterizes the Japanese economy. They hold more wealth than the national debt, and it's not helping the country. So part of the prime minister's plan on new capitalism is to relinquish, or to have that wealth flow back into the economy. He's figuring out all sorts of different ways to do that, and one of them is to have people who are reluctant to invest in risky business, they'd rather hold on to it and not earn much interest on it because it's just safer, even though it's not very lucrative, to become involved in the stock market and investing in new companies, in startups and new innovations. So he's trying to trigger that. He has relinquished a lot of tax gains that he could have on capital gains for people who are investing. So he's encouraging people to invest in companies and having a tax advantage for that. And that's actually moving. There's a program that has been in process for maybe 10 years, and it's received new life now. But the stock market has not done very well under the Kishida administration. Excuse me. And by the way, I'm still here in Lake Saiko on the foothills of Mount Fuji, and I will be returning to Japan in about 2 days. But the stock market has not done very well under Mr. Kishida. In fact, it has fallen. Let me see, about Nikkei has fallen about 9.4% in the last 12 years. So I'm not a major critic of the prime minister. In fact, I need to just report on things that I find out, things that I know about Japanese politics without adding too much commentary. But the prime minister has lots of people who are shooting for him, who want him to fail, who want him to look bad, not only because it reflects on the LDP, but also even for those people that are in the LDP, it maybe burnishes their image by bringing somebody else down, as you know, frequently happens. It's not that all boats are rising up, it's just that all the boats are going down and you're somewhat unblemished by COVID or by the Unification Church or by some political scandal. And there's a lot going on all of those areas. So with regard to the prime minister and just laying out kind of flat, even if you are neutral about the prime minister, there's a lot to be said about his last 12 months in office. He's only been in office for about 14 months, 15 months. So real price wages have declined 2.6% under the Kishida administration. And let me see, that's two decades of just stagnant growth, even when he came into office and talking about the new economy, new capitalism, and interjecting money into the economy, which he has done. The supplemental budget was the largest in Japanese history, almost half as large as the entire defense budget for the next 5 years. So he is attempting to do that, but in any case, inflation is still at a 40-year high. Consumer prices are up 3.6%, and within that, the non-perishable goods are up 6.7%. Energy prices are up 24%. But we understand a little bit of that because of what's going on with Ukraine, with what's going on with COVID and coming out of COVID and the supply chain issues. But it actually goes quite a bit deeper than that. The trade deficit that Japan suffers from, 16 straight months of decline. And just in this year alone, 2022, last year alone, 18.5 trillion yen of deficit in trade. That means 18 trillion yen Japan needed to pay out without bringing money back in. So it's just a tremendous amount of money, a tremendous drain. The largest trade deficit that Japan has had before 2022 was in 2014, and that was at 12 trillion. So you can see that there's really something going on. A lot of this can be blamed on COVID, on the supply chain, on Russia, on China, on a lot of different things, but it is falling on Mr. Kishida's administration. The Nikkei, as I said, over the last 12 months has fallen 9.4%. And even in light of COVID, and he gets criticized for this quite a bit, you might be shocked to hear that under the Kishida administration over the last 12 months, let me see, 60% of all deaths by COVID have occurred under the Kishida administration. 94% of all infections since COVID began in 2022 have occurred in the Kishida administration. And 70% of all the deaths that have occurred as a consequence of COVID have occurred under the Kishida administration. So even if you're not attacking him, these kind of negative things are things that will pull any prime minister down. And as we've said before, there has been no prime minister in Japanese history that has lost 3 members of his cabinet in 1 month with a support rating dwelling in the low 30s has not survived. We've got even a little bit more bad news for the prime minister. He has another minister, reconstruction minister, Kenya Akiba, who it is reported he will be released from his duties any day now. We thought it would be quite a bit earlier, but it hasn't happened yet. The prime minister is considering shuffling the cabinet en masse, just doing a major reshuffle. He's discounted that a little bit. He's fallen back on perhaps getting a new reconstruction minister and maybe replacing 1 or 2. People are scratching their heads on who he's going to choose. And the other 2 or 3 choices are that he could just close down the House. He has said 2-3 days ago that he has no intention of closing down the House and calling for a snap election. That would be a bad idea, in my view. I think most pundits would agree with that. But I think in any event, he is going to reshuffle some of the ministers of his cabinet. Part of that is due to COVID. Part of that is due to the Unification Church. Probably most of it is due to the Unification Church. Whatever relations that Diet members might have with the Unification Church, that is beginning to be a huge issue. We thought it would be dealt with rather swiftly, and it just has continued to morph and morph. The Unification Church has been demanded to respond to questions on the 16th of January, so a lot of people are waiting for that. The Diet doesn't go into session until the end of January, and in between that time, there's a lot going on, and on the 16th, the Unification Church must show up and respond to questions that was provided to them about 10, 12 days ago by the culture minister. And under oath, these questions must be responded to. And depending on what the responses are, it could inflame a much huger investigation of these kind of gift giving or donation giving practices that are also the bread and butter of any church-like entity in Japan, including Soka. So it could cause some problems there. But it also could reveal some of the major politicians who have been supporting the Unification Church in responding to these questions. And you got to believe that the opposition is going to be right there too, because they want to gain as much political momentum out of this as possible. The prime minister is in a difficult position because before the Diet starts, he needs to placate things. He needs the Diet to work together to pass the budget for 2024 or moving forward. The 2023 has already been discussed. Diet budget hearings go on from in this Diet session. This is the main purpose of the ordinary Diet session, which will end in around June. But they need to pass the budget by April 1st. So if there's the same kind of controversy that he has when he started the extraordinary Diet session, where he couldn't get anything done because people wanted answers and he had to circulate promissory statements from all of the members of the LDP that, what the extent of their Unification Church interactions were. If he has to go through something like that again, he's just not going to be able to pass the budget. There'll be a no confidence motion submitted either by the opposition or even by the LDP themselves. So he's got a lot of that going on that he's got to deal with. So he is in a pretty deep, dark place. A lot of things are coming out as a consequence of that. But he's got maybe today is the 1st, so he's got 26 days before he needs to open the Diet. That's a constitutional mandate. It is in the Constitution that needs to do that. The emperor comes in, crosses the moat, and comes in and opens the Diet. That is one of the duties of the emperor. So that's something to look forward to. But he is going to be facing a lot of headwinds. In the meantime, it is reported that he will be visiting Europe, probably from the 8th until the 12th. So that's just next week. He's going to be visiting maybe 4 countries during that period of time. He's hosting the G7, as you know, in the spring. So he's trying to build those forces up. You know, when you think about if you're the LDP dumping the current prime minister because you want somebody else, this particular prime minister coming as he does from Hiroshima, being the president of the G7 this year, starting today. Japan is the presiding country for the G7 and the host country for what's going to be happening. It's awful hard to change horses during that period of time, and you got to believe that he's going to be leveraging that as much as possible. He's also going to be visiting. He's going to be in Europe from the 8th to the 12th, come back to Japan, and then go to the United States on the 17th to visit with Joe Biden and to shore up those things, not just for the G7, but there's an awful lot going on the defense side of things, and I'd like to talk about that as well too. There's a lot of other things going on. Nothing stands still. Even the diet session has ended. It's New Year's Day. There's always something going on. You might remember that Mr. Hagiura, who is the policy affairs chief of the LDP, suddenly visited Taipei about 2 weeks ago. And it just kind of came out of the blue. He was the highest ranking LDP individual within the LDP administration to visit Taipei in like 6 years. And he went with a very small delegation that did not include the parliamentary chairman of the Republic of the Taiwan government and the Japanese government parliamentary union. So that is an individual who has been in politics and been the leader of the relations between Taiwan and Japan for a long time. And he wasn't invited to that Hagiura visit. It caused a lot of dissension. And now it's reported that 11 team member will be visiting Taipei this next week. 4 days, 11 parliamentarians, all of them from the Seiwakai. This is pretty interesting. Mr. Hagiura, policy affairs chief who went 2 weeks ago, is also from Seiwakai. He is one of the potential leaders of the Seiwakai. They're still trying to figure that out. He is, quickly and strongly being promoted as that viable leader. The other person that is really strong there is Mr. Seko, Hiroshige Seko. He is in the upper house, and he is also a potential contender within the Seiwakai. The only problem with Mr. Seko is that he's in the upper house, and the prime minister never comes from the upper house. He always comes from the lower house. And so he is not really looked at as the most ideal leader for the former Abe faction. It turns out that when there's going to be another election, the talk is that he's going to change his party, his house affiliation. He's going to give up his seat in the upper house so that he can run in the lower house. And obviously he will win. That is an election tactic that's not used very often, but it is a kind of a statement that I'm going to run for prime minister eventually. That's why even though I'm in the upper house, I'm going to give that up, that nice cushy 6-year term that is unaffected by what's going on within the prime minister's office, to go to the rumble and tumble of the lower house because I want to become prime minister eventually. Anyway, these 11 individuals from the Seiwakai will be visiting the president there and talking about defense and and Japan, Taiwan cooperation, particularly with regard to semiconductors. So there's a lot going on there. You can smell the money that is being talked about in all the defense spending. Defense spending, as you might know, the 3 documents were passed just 2 weeks ago. And sorry, I'm getting a buzz here, Maya. defense spending for the three documents that were promoted and issued and stamped by the Prime Minister's office increased the defense budget for just 2023 by 26%. So the overall over 5 years, the object is to increase the budget by 2% of the national budget. So it's now currently at 1%. But to go to 43 trillion yen over the next 5 years, that is a tremendous change. And it's going to change Japan. I mean, if you were here during the bubble years and you look back and you say, Japan was like that then, in 4 or 5 years, you're going to be able to look back at January 1st, 2023, and remember Japan used to be like that, but it's like this now. So this is the same kind of epical change that is underfoot right now, this amount of defense spending and what the Japanese government is doing to provide defensive measures for the country. So in 2023, defense spending will jump incredibly to kind of ramp it up. And of that money for the missile defense program, they are getting about, I don't know what figure to give you. In yen terms, it's 828 billion yen, which is about $6 billion for just defense spending. That's 3 times what it was in 2022. And of that, for the Tomahawks, so a lot of people are talking about the Tomahawks, that is about 211 billion, which is about $1.5 billion for the 500 Tomahawk missiles that Japan is going to buy for this year. So they need to ramp it up. They need to prime the pump. They need to get the infrastructure going. They need to strengthen the defense posture, the barracks, the storage of ammunitions, the outer islands, and that sort of thing. There's a lot going on there. And in light of that, the economy keeps being weighed down. People want to have higher wages, and the Prime Minister has said, we have to pay for this. 1/4 of the defense budget needs to come out of consumers' taxes. But I'm not going to do it this year, not in 2023. Maybe 2024 will start that. So there's a lot of shell games going on, and I don't know if the population is really ready for that. A lot of this has happened without a lot of public debate, even for people like you and I who are following this thing. This has come up over, the last 5 or 6 months is when we've begun to talk about it. So there's a lot to be curious about. The cabinet reshuffle, how that is handled by the Prime Minister will either solidify or even further, make his position unstable. So a lot is going to happen between now and when the diet opens. And probably if he does what he always does, which is Kentochu, think about it, and he doesn't do anything substantive before the diet opens. When the diet opens, then there'll be a lot of fireworks there. So a lot to wait for. And finally, with the North Korea, they fired 3 missiles. I don't know if you're following that. 2 days ago, yesterday, 8 o'clock in the morning, 3 missiles were fired. This is maybe the 90th missile launch that they've had, including cruise missiles and ballistic missiles. It was done as a consequence, kind of as a consequence. Initially on maybe 3 days ago, there was a swarm of drones from North Korea that invaded South Korean territory. It was just like a probe, like the Chinese are doing with Taiwan. They breach their security zone, and then they come back and they have to send, receptors, other airplanes up there to receive them and to fend them off. So that happened, and then the South Koreans, they sent a swarm over in retribution, and nothing was happening. Nobody was hurt, or no firefights or anything like that. But it was an incursion, and as a consequence of that, then they fired these 3 missiles. Apparently, that's the thinking that's going on there. So you can anticipate that 2023 is going to be more and more ratcheting up. This is what our great leader is good at, ratcheting it up and seeking more and more concessions. In fact, the United States and South Korea, Japan, this coalition of forces is becoming more and more bound together. You might have read that Chinese tourists now traveling anywhere in the world, they have to have tests, they have to have no COVID. So it's not just economic, it's also tourism, it's also travel of people. The Chinese tourists, business travelers indeed, are having an extremely hard time, and this kind of pressure is just beginning to mount. It's not just defensive. It's not just with the drones or with the missiles. It's a full court press that's going on even now as we're talking. So we're going to continue to watch this. There's a lot going on. There's a lot going on with the Prime Minister. I'm sorry this is a bit of a short version today, Maya, but I think that's it for right now. We can talk about other things in the question and answer period, but for me, I'm frozen. You should unmute your mic.
Thank you.
It's so rare when I'm able to catch you, so I really relish those opportunities.
All right. So thank you for anyway for not giving up and for staying there. I am sorry that you're almost freezing. Hope that you can jump into the house now and also into Clubhouse as well, so that we can continue with the Q&A there. Thank you, Timothy. Okay, so please try to unfreeze.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. I look forward to talking with you next week and talking maybe in a little bit more depth and more detail when I've got all of my accoutrements around me and I'm not freezing my butt off in the foothills of Mount Fuji to give you this weekly report. By the way, this is episode 99. Our next one will be episode 100, Maya. Congratulations.
To you too. And thank you. Because it's been possible because of you. Yes. So, okay. I'll see you in the Clubhouse then.